joined by uh, Mr. Shankaran, uh, A. Shankaran, who is the OSD of wildlife to the Telangana state government, and he has been for several years the forest official, and he joins us on the phone line from Hyderabad. Mr. Shankaran, sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Right. I can hear you also a little bit, and let me pose a rather longish question to you at the start.
Yeah.
What we are looking at right now in terms of visuals is several groups of animals which are, especially during lockdown, coming onto urban environments, animals straying from the habitat. Do you think the silence which was generated by the lack of industrial and human activity during the day and during the night, what kind of effect do you think it has had on wildlife and also on plant life? Let's start with the wildlife, sir.
Yeah, let me just start by telling you that man who is living on this planet, he is not the only inhabitant. There are millions of species of plants, animals, which are coexisting on this planet, and man is just one of those millions of species. And since ages, all different types of animals, plants, they have learned to coexist in a community. No plant or no life, no animal can survive in isolation. There cannot be any life in isolation. They all depend on fellow creatures around them, they interact with them, and then they share the resources. And then this is how life has been going on over millions and billions of years, and you have seen new species getting involved and the older species getting extinct. So this is all law of nature.
You're right.
The law of it is that no species can live in isolation.
Right.
They all need to share time, share space. So this is what has been lacking in the human behavior as of now.
And so now while we do agree the concept of sharing is something which has occupied philosophers and scientists and people who love nature across down the centuries, but in real terms, how much of that concept is translated on the ground? Because until the COVID happened, sharing was not something that human society actually wanted to do with nature, with animals. Now that COVID has forced us into kind of a shell, in kind of enclosed spaces, we are forced to share. So this sharing is unequal. It's a factor of the effect of the COVID-19. Do you think this kind of sharing will continue post the lockdown?
Yeah. Actually, we think that humans are the most intelligent of all creatures, and
Yes,
then
given.
we rule over all other creatures. But if you really see and if you really observe, animals also are very intelligent. So, in spite of human presence in almost all parts of the world, all corners of the world, on land, on sea, in water bodies, in the air, the human presence has been noticed. But animals have very cleverly separated themselves from human beings by time and space. See, many of the animals are confined to areas which have lesser human activities, which are remote and inaccessible. And also you have majority of the animals being nocturnal.
Yeah.
So they are active during night because man being a diurnal animal, he goes to sleep in the night. And there's more time available for animals to come out and perform their biological function.
Right.
But then this human activity is slowly resulting in lesser and lesser space and lesser time being available to wild animals to fulfill their biological requirements.
Right.
This is something which is very, very disturbing. But suddenly, 8 months back, or you can say more 10 months back, when the COVID struck,
Yeah.
something very different happened. Suddenly we found that human beings were confined to their homes, vehicles were off-road, shops and establishments were closed, industries were closed, aircraft flying from one country to another, they stopped flying. There were lesser number of ships, lesser number of boats in the sea. So with these lesser activities, suddenly animals found that they have more space and more time to move.
Right.
So slowly they started venturing out of their normal territory or their normal home, and they started moving to surrounding areas. That's
Yes.
how many people started reporting sighting more animals on land, on sea. Whales coming closer to the shore, dolphins coming closer closer to the shore. Leopards and tigers, which are normally nocturnal, were sighted during day. Herds of deer were seen crossing the road during daytime. All these pleasant things happened because of the restriction on movement of humanity.
Right. Okay. Now tell us about a situation. Now let's assume that we are on the first day of the lockdown. Worldwide there is a lockdown, and everything has gone silent. Factories have gone silent. There are no airplanes flying. The entire human activity is now the only activity that is happening indoors within four walls. You have just probably cooking happening and the TV set on. In such a scenario, what do you think is happening? What kind of silence permeates the world, and how important is this silence for animals to feel safer? Because obviously animals are very sensitive to sound, and how did that affect wildlife across the world in terms of this particular silence? Suddenly, like within 24 hours, the entire world grew silent, or probably like say 15 days, because the lockdown was in phases across the world.
To understand how animals would have felt, let us take for example our own family. Suppose there is a family of 5 or 6 members. We have grandparents, parents and kids. So they all live under one roof.
Yeah.
Then each individual wants time and space. You cannot encroach on your children's time, children's space. They won't tolerate it. Similarly, your parents would not want your interference in everything they do. They require their own privacy. They require their own time and space. So once you understand that sharing and caring is important, things won't go bad. But this is what we have forgotten. We have actually abused time, abused space, and then we have encroached on the territory of animals, making them very, very insecure, and then disturbing the normal routine and the place where they feel comfortable. They were forced to move to interior areas, more hostile areas. The area available to them became less and less. And then suddenly this change of lesser human activities, it dawned on them that less of human presence, so they could start moving out. And then I'm very sure the animal would have been very, very happy during this period. And to tell you, it's not just animals were happy, there are many nature lovers who felt very good. They felt that now the nature has given back to human beings. They started taking too much from nature, and this is the nature's response of telling man where you belong and where you should have a sort of regulation and control on your activities. The animals had more time.
Yeah.
You open the window, people could hear birds chirping.
Yes.
And I don't know how many of you have observed, the summer was relatively very mild.
Summer, okay.
May, the month of May in Hyderabad, temperature used to be 43, 44 for almost a month and more than a month.
Right.
This time we hardly experienced any heat wave or anything like that. Very pleasantly the summer passed, and without us noticing that the summer is almost gone. People were not uncomfortable during the summer also. There was less dust, less pollution, and then less noise, and then more fresh air. So all these helped in mitigating the
Effects of the
difficult
summer.
times of summer.
So how did the summer become cooler due to due to the presence of lockdown
Where
in Hyderabad?
you sit on the balcony of your house.
Yeah, I do understand.
The vehicle used to move.
Yes.
So now suddenly you find that the roads are empty. There's hardly any movement, hardly any dust, and then no smoke, no dust, and then the air was breathable. And this had impact on the temperature also. Because with more heat, more smoke and more dust, you feel hotter than what normally is.
Yeah, it's a sense of perception.
Yeah, the perception is more than that. And I'm very sure this summer would have been 3 to 4 degrees lesser than the normal summer of that. So you can see the impact of the reduction in pollution, dust, smoke and other particulate matter around us.
Okay. Now in terms of animal behavior, do you think this kind of silence would probably lead to more animal activity? We have seen animals straying into human habitations, into urban centers. Do you also foresee in fact the fact that animals would probably get more productive, in the sense that you could see an increase in the population of animals and birds, because now they have a wider range of areas in which they can inhabit. They also have a lot of peace and calm, and also they have less fear of human activity being very close to them.
What you say is very true. The animals will do well when they have a good congenial environment, and then there is lesser disturbance to them. They feel more free. Even psychologically also they are relaxed.
Yes.
But we work under stress. When things around us don't go well, we are under stress. So that disturbs our normal activity. But animals, when they are under stress, they behave differently. Once the stress is removed in the form of lesser number of human beings interfering into forest areas, lesser number of people coming down to cut trees, lesser number of hunters and poachers, and then lesser forest fires. See, normally summer, all majority of the forest areas in India burn, and more than 90% of the forest fires are man-made. They are not natural forests. Many people think that forest fires are natural. Less than 10% of the forest fires are natural. More than 90% are man-made. So we had lesser fires this time. So all these led to lesser stress on the animals. And they would definitely have felt very comfortable to perform their biological functions, to mate, to breed better. But then, unfortunately, this period is too short. Already we have started seeing human beings getting back to normal. The roads have started becoming congested again. Again, vehicular traffic has increased. Factories have started. So, all slowly getting back to normal. And then the animal would definitely be retreating back. And some well-minded people said, whether COVID or not COVID, every year we should have some closure period, so that we can give rest to nature and allow nature to recuperate. This is the feeling of many of the well-minded people in touch with this spoke, and then felt that there should be a mandatory closure period, mandatory lockdown periodically. But nature to recover.
Yeah,
I don't think that is possible.
Yeah, but
what we wish for.
But which months should this be? Like, should it be? Let us assume, for theoretical sake, that the United Nations takes up this kind of initiative. So, what months would you suggest this lockdown happen? Is it like a definite set of number of days, like 15 days? We are all talking about theoretically here, and this is not something. But let us assume that there is some kind of a scientific argument and some positive support to the idea that there can be a lockdown and we can impose it using something like the World Climate Body. Which months do you think there should be locked down, and how frequent?
I think that would depend on the location of the country. Countries which are closer to tropics, closer to the equator, the dry months, that is the summer months, are most critical for the wild animals. This is the time when there is shortage of food, shortage of water. Water is scarce, and then resources like green grass, leaves are very scarce in summer. Hardly you see anything.
Yeah, are we talking about the countries with temperate climate, sir?
No, tropical climate.
Tropical climate, okay.
Yeah, like on either side of the equator.
Okay.
Like India and then South American countries, African countries, Asian countries.
But wouldn't
which are closer to equator.
Yeah, but wouldn't you have more of temperate grasslands above 22.5 degrees when you have more white?
Definitely. Yeah. So in these tropical countries, summer is very critical. So in summer, if you have lesser human beings, and then it's not just human beings. We always think that man going into forest is bad for him. See, there are people who take thousands and thousands of cattle into the forest because there is no fodder available outside.
Yes.
Grazers, they take thousands and thousands of cattle into the forest, and then all the little resources that are available, little bit of water, little bit of grass are consumed by domestic cattle.
The nutrition is actually taken away.
Same for the wild animals.
Yes.
So summer is a critical period when if there is reduced activity, then animals will have better chance of propagating and increasing. And then rainy season, mercifully, rainy season gives nature a break. During the heavy rains, like the rains we had this year,
Yes.
from June to September or June to October, 3 or 4 months of good rain, will automatically keep people away from forest areas. and the resources are in plenty. With more rainfall, you have more grass, more leaves, more streams, more water being collected in pools and ponds and then small tanks. So animals don't have much difficulty surviving during this season because it's the season of plenty. But summer is very critical. Summer is the time when there should be absolutely no human presence in the forest area. It leads to forest fires, cattle going to the forest, more poaching, more hunting during summer because animals are more visible. So the leaves would have shed, forest is dry, there's no cover for the animals. So they become easy prey to hunters and poachers.
So now,
and then winter they may be in temperate countries, it would be a different period. So that can be worked out in the temperate countries and tropical countries. But then we should all agree that nature has to be given rest every year. For a period, 15 days won't be enough, it should be not less than a month.
right.
15 days is too short for nature to do that. A few days would just go without noticing, and then very soon the activities will start again. So a month's closure would be more good.
Also in case of, for example, say Gir forest, where you have during the summer competition between the cattle of the herdsman and also animals within the lion reserve, how will a lockdown in that particular forest help? Because obviously the cattle herders go into the forest out of lack of an alternative. So is it possible that if there is, assuming there is a lockdown, the herders will still take the cattle into the forest? How can one ensure that that particular case is resolved satisfactorily, as in lockdown has an effect on providing ample space for animals during summer, during the lean summer months, to forage, to fodder, and also to other food inside the forest. And also you also have domesticated cattle, which also enough for fodder. How, as a forest officer, do you think you always have to struggle between these two ends? On the one side, cattle herders and the cattle and the livelihood, and other side, wildlife and its basic right to existence without being disturbed by human intervention or domesticated cattle.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, you made a very good point. But then when we say there should be a mandatory closure period, if we have that in mind, then people will start planning. For example, even these people who take cattle to the, if they come to know that next 1 month or next 2 months they won't be allowed into the forest, they would start looking for alternatives.
Right.
Actually, there's plenty of land available outside where fodder can be grown, and then cattle can be fed on the fodder which is farmed outside the forest area and outside agricultural land. So much of land available. Every village has some amount of village-based land.
Grassland.
We just are not utilized at all. So once they are told you won't be allowed to go into the forest for a certain period, then for that period they will start planning something in advance. And see that during that period they will have enough to feed the cattle, they grow enough to feed the cattle. So with restrictions, people will start looking for alternatives. Now they don't look for alternatives because there is no restriction. 365 days a year they are in the forest area. And they don't need to spend a rupee on growing any grass or leaf or anything. They just encroach into the habitat of wild animals and they consume everything. And then wild animals are so sensitive, they cannot compete with village cattle. Till the cattle goes back to the village, wild animals don't venture out. They are scared of wild animals, domestic animals.
And the reason being that the domesticated animals are more, more unshy. They're not shy at all, and they're very bold.
They are not shy at all. They are bigger in size, and they are led by a person who takes care of them.
Right.
So make them bolder.
And they are in a herd.
Very sensitive, very shy, and they are in a herd.
Yeah. And also, actually, till you said this point, I was particularly under the general impression that domesticated animals are a kind of a risk within forests because they have predators like tigers and leopards trying to hunt them down. But good point, I do agree that there are several animals who are probably herbivore and who probably are very shy of domesticated animals. Across Nalamala, what have you noticed, sir? We have this incident from April in this month when we had a leopard. When we had a leopard come into the city of Hyderabad, and create such an havoc. Stayed around in Hyderabad for 5 months. Do you think that also was the effect of lockdown?
Yeah, definitely, because there was less of disturbance in that area. And even actually normally in rainy season, the animals, wild animals like leopards, which come close to human habitation,
Yes.
maybe they would have come in search of water or some prey. But once you have good rain, they tend to retreat back to the original habitat, that is the hillers, top of the hillers, which are away from human habitat.
And which is
This
drier
particular
also.
leopard, yeah, this particular leopard in peak rainy season, it happened to come back to its place where it was there during summer. We didn't expect the leopard to come back here because so much is available in the original place where it was residing. And because of lesser human activity, maybe it has ventured out and then made a kill of 2 calves on one particular night. And then that gave us an opportunity to trap it very safely. So this happened, yeah, it could be one of the reasons. And there was another instance of a slot bear entering Nagar town. And it came to abandoned Chinmati area, was moving around the compound during daytime, straight from the forest. And then it